For me, life was a whirlwind of lights and smoke, music and men. I lived in a beaten-up shanty close to North Edsa, crammed in a closet-like room with a bunch of other women. We slept on mats on the dirty floor, and shared the space with mange-infested dogs, flea-bitten cats, and cockroaches. My wardrobe consisted mostly of skimpy skirts, tank tops, and the cheapest high heels you could buy in Quiopa. After a hard night at the bars of dancing and exposing myself, sometimes spending time in the back room with a heavily drunk man, and my eyes like dead fish staring up at the ceiling, I earned enough cash to go out and thrift shop. The weather in Manila had become chilly at night, and I needed a sweater. I took a walk down a few streets that smelled of garbage and human urine, mixed with the smog from jeepneys, tricycles, and trucks that never ended. It wasn't long before I found a street lined with secondhand clothes, undoubtedly from American charities, but somehow grabbed by greedy merchants looking to make extra pesos. The sweater was like a pearl in murky waters as it lay neatly on top of a bunch of tattered, mothy clothes. Wondering how someone had not bought it yet, I quickly took it up in my hands and studied the richness of the fabric. It was as soft as rabbit's fur and just as warm. Across the front was a large pouch you could put your hands in for warmth, and that's where I found the note on the crumpled piece of yellow paper. It smelled like the section of a library where ancient books could be found, dust and dank. On the paper were scrawled the words, "Where? 67th Banoe Street. Pay, 1,000 pesos a night. Job, lay on the bed from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. Keep your eyes shut. Never open them. Past 3, your money will be on the dresser." Banoe Street. The note didn't say which city, but I recalled the name of the street in Quezon that one of my roommates used to visit for a client. It was where the more upper-class people lived. I stuffed the note in my pocket and paid the merchant. Only 30 pesos, not bad. The sweater was wonderful on my skin and made me glow like a snowflake. I felt like one of those young starlets on our local Capamia TV network. And in my pocket was the promise of an easy, high-paying job. Those came so rarely. I must admit that, even if the job seemed sketchy, the promise of 1,000 pesos a night was tempting. I could get myself out of my situation, maybe go to college, find a real job. After a lot of asking and searching, I found the house that night. 67th Banoe Street was in desolate condition, even if it was an upper-class neighborhood. A single-story house surrounded by a short wired fence. Yard unkempt, weeds stuck up like tousled hair. Boards molded, loose, shingles chipped, paint faded, the windows cloaked with dust. Still, it was 100 times better than any shanty I slept in. The light of the patio was on as I approached, and when I knocked, the door opened as if ajar. I called hello, no answer. The interior smelled aged and sour, like wet laundry left in the wash for days. I stepped inside, leaving the door slightly open so the light from the patio could illuminate my way. The floor felt as if it might give way beneath my weight. I felt the walls pressing in on me, heavy and damp. The place reminded me of the body that they'd found in the sewage canal close to where I lived, bloated and bruised, deteriorated. I passed the dark living room. There was a TV, a battered couch, a coffee table with an ashtray and some empty cans. The room reeked of cat urine and dried feces. No one there. I attempted to turn on some light switches but found them useless. I turned away and headed down a hallway, noticing a pale light glowing underneath a closed door. I called again. Absolute silence. I clasped the handle and pushed, ignoring the greasy residue it left on my palm. I found a single bed covered in drab sheets, one dresser beside it with a digital clock. It illuminated the time strongly through the darkness. 10:50 p.m. Feeling disturbed, I might have turned away. The house was empty. I admit I thought the job was just going to be another man looking for a quick fix, but now I was curious. It didn't seem that way, and the uncertainty of it unnerved me. But still, 1,000 pesos was too good to pass. I needed to find out if it were true. I lay on the bed with a note in my hands, facing the glow of the clock. 10:54. I listened. The house made no sound. muffled as if a hand lay over it. I felt afraid, but excited. 10:56. My heart throbbed from my chest through my throat in my head. I imagined the ticking of the clock, tried to match my heart with its beats. 10:59. I shut my eyes, waited. 11 came. I knew with my eyes closed because the change in the atmosphere was immediate. I was not alone. My eyes were shut, yet I felt it, so close to my face. The minute hairs on my forehead tingled. It breathed, tight, stressed, as if forced to breathe only through its nose. I felt the air warm the area just above my lips. I smelled it, a sour smell, like pickled gums. And there was something else, a pungent, thick sweet, the smell of blood. I resisted the urge to gag. Seconds turned into minutes, and still the presence lingered above my face. My body suffered, paralyzed with fear. I felt every strained breath in, out, slow, afraid. I felt the slightest itch in my body, the prickles against my legs, biting up my thighs, behind my back and my neck. Sweat creeping, crawling, brushing upturned hairs and begging me to scratch and move. I didn't. Bones ached. Muscles wept. My heart struggled like a sparrow caught in someone's hands. The presence continued its steady closeness to my face. My forehead glittered with sweat and now began to throb. My nose prickled, twitched. I wondered if it saw that. Even my eyelids sweat, my eyes behind them stiff, shot, scared, hiding behind lids like frightened children in the closet. The smell relented. My lungs resisted its entry, asking for me to turn my head away, escape from such a foul smell, yet I could not. Every part of my body was frozen so long as the thing stared into my face. Never opened them. My hands still clutching the note. As long as I kept my eyes closed, I thought nothing could happen to me. I analyzed the letter in my mind, repeated those 3 words, never open them. Again, 10 times, uncountable times, steeling myself to start my next move. I breathed, a long inhale. Sourness and the sickly smell of blood swamped my lungs. I gagged, coughed, and then I turned. I turned away into the bed, curling myself, fetal-like, eyes clamped shut like vices. And when I relaxed, I felt it still there, a hair's width away from my face. It was hovering, floating. How could the thing have moved with me? I didn't feel any weight on the bed during the transition, any sign that suggested that it had crawled over me, moved beside me, refocused itself against my face. I allowed a few minutes to pass before I tried again. I moved slowly, deliberately, sensing it against my face, and it moved with mine smoothly, soundlessly, until it was completely on my back. My face, eyes shut, staring straight up, the thing looked down at me, relentlessly. I grimaced. My brows sweated. I wanted to bat at it, but I couldn't. I was too afraid. All I could clutch onto was my promise that this could end. I waited, ached, sweated. It stayed with me, always there. I couldn't sleep. 3 a.m. The digital clock alarmed, and just like that, I was released. The thing that had looked at my face for 4 hours was gone. I didn't immediately open my eyes. I waited until the sweat on my brows became cold and dry. I listened to my body unlock, one by one, like a warden walking through a prison, releasing the prisoners cell by cell. I could breathe again. My heart pumped, bold and strong. I felt my fingers, the warmth on my skin. I yearned to stretch and felt life sizzle through every part of me. I opened my eyes. 1,000 pesos lay on the dresser. 1,000 pesos for the horror I had endured. I took it and didn't look back as I left. A week passed since the night I spent there. Although my money was gone now, spent over things I can't even remember, the memories of the night had not. Not a moment went by where I wasn't thinking of the thing that had breathed so close to my face. Could I have been imagining it? Perhaps my fears had been so strong, My mind had created something to justify it, but my senses couldn't have been tricking me. I smelled it, blood and sour rank. I felt it, warm breath on my face. Who had left the money? What was the presence I felt? And the question that caused me the most dread: what would have happened if I had opened my eyes? My return to the house was no longer just for money, but for answers. That evening I returned. I noticed that nothing had changed. The only difference from the first time I had been there were the bed sheets, still crumpled from my use. The effervescent light from the clock was resolute, like a statue's stern stare, almost punishing as I lay on the bed. Just a few seconds before 11 p.m., I shut my eyes. The thing appeared close to my face, exactly on the second. This time, my fears were replaced by a studious curiosity. I noticed that right before it arrived, I didn't sense anyone walk into the room. Its presence was fluid, soundless, as if it had materialized from thin air. The thick smell of blood and sourness were consistent with the first time. I turned my head slowly left and right, and every movement was mirrored perfectly by it. Like studying yourself in a mirror, your reflection so close to your face you could fog it with the breath from your nostrils. I dared to do one more thing I had not the night before. I brought my hands up to my face, cautiously, feeling my bones creak between the tense muscle and cold skin, the sweat building on my frightened palms and fingers. As my hands reached close, they stopped, protested, hesitated. My heart banged like wild mice in a cage. I grimaced, summoning all of my courage, eyes sweating behind the lids, temples pounding. My hands moved again. The unseen presence continued to breathe, steady, undaunting, unmoving. My fingers touched something. I stopped. Every part of my body froze. I couldn't breathe. The blood on my face swelled as I choked on fear. The breathing from the thing changed. It grew raspy, excited. Its putrid breath hit my face more powerfully. I could not tell my fingers to move. They stayed where they were, paralyzed, touching it. The length of time that passed after, I couldn't recall. My mind too swamped with fear. All I could remember was that at last, the lockdown of my mind had subsided enough that my fingers tried to comprehend what it was touching. Hair. Sickly and cold. My heart banged. My fingers moved slightly. I feel the firmness of a scalp beneath the hair. The thing continued to breathe as if exhausted. Somehow I had managed to detach myself from the paralyzing terror of my body, and now I was moving my fingers like a puppeteer would to its marionette. They followed the curve of the scalp, lowering until I felt skin. The skin felt torn and jagged, and the sickly fluid was thicker there. My fingers passed the broken skin, and now I was palpating what felt like flesh. The flesh of chopped beef parts in the market, sickly and soft. I lowered my hands. My heart thumped so hard I thought I might die of heart failure. I was too scared to continue the investigation. It felt like I had been touching a severed head. 3 a.m. Again, I waited until I was relaxed enough before opening my eyes. Like before, 1,000 pesos lay neatly on the dresser. My hands, still paralyzing from what they had felt earlier, were clean. I thought they might be soaked in blood, but there was nothing. I ran from the house, terrified. Perhaps a ghost was haunting the building, and I promised to never return, no matter how much money I needed. But that was a month ago. My roommate and I had taken a turn for the worst. Town officials were cracking down on businesses like the ones we worked at, and required to show proof that we were tested, just to make sure that we weren't spreading any diseases. But lab tests required money. The bar managers I worked for were only snatching up girls who could give them negative tests quickly, and space was limited. In spite of the fear I felt, the promises I had made to never return, the need for money was greater. After all, hadn't nothing bad ever happened to me while I was there? 11 p.m. The demonic presence returned. I grimaced my eyes tight, determining not to let it scare me. I told myself the job was easy. Keep my eyes closed from 11 to 3 and I'll be paid. Handsomely. I suppose I'd gotten used to the presence. For only a few hours into the night, I found myself fighting the urge to sleep. The rhythm of its breathing lured me. In, out, in, out. Its sour, putrid breath mixed with the sickly sweet smell of blood, perfuming me to sleep. I tried hard to fight it, but I failed, and soon sleep's heavy hand had successfully pressed down on my weary mind. The girl in my dreams was pretty. Slim body, short, hair long and straight, as dark as skies in the province. Eyes deep and shadowy. She watched me as I sleep. So close to my face, I could place a hand on her cheek and ask why she was there. "Leave," she whispered. "Leave." Her face grew distorted, and then she started making choking, gagging sounds. I sat up with horror and watched as her skin turned to a ghastly blue. Her eyes bulged and turned red. She was trying to scream, say something, but all I could hear were the hoarse, ragged breathing sounds that watched me as And I was awake. By some miraculous reason, I had not opened my eyes, but the room was filled with the same choking, gasping sounds that I had heard in my dream. The floor shook as if there was some violent commotion happening in the room with me, and then silence. Only my beating heart banging in my ears. Still, I didn't open my eyes. Not now. Not until I could hear the alarm so that I could safely take the money and leave. But it didn't end there. The next sounds I heard sickened me more than anything I had ever experienced. A rhythmic, moist sound, like someone carving flesh with a saw, and then dripping. A thump as though something heavy hit the floor. I heard footsteps, heavy and slow, heading my way. Every inch of my body screamed to open my eyes. Run! I was shaking, sweating, so fear-stricken like a bellowing animal held upside down before its throat was slit. The footsteps kept coming. Breathe. Breathe. I couldn't. I needed to run, but I couldn't. I was afraid. I had lasted for too long keeping my eyes closed. I couldn't open them, no matter how insane it sounded. The footsteps stopped, right next to the bed I lay on. The thing was once more pressed close to my face, breathing, gasping. It felt like my muscles would snap under the tension. My fear was like 1,000 knives angled towards my body. The slightest move threatened to kill me. Minutes stretched on slowly, cruelly. I wanted out. Out of everything. The room, the need for money, the nights with strangers, and the terror of it all. Call girl. I wanted out. 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 And then, a blessing like the sun after a typhoon. The sounds of the alarm clock. 3 a.m. I opened my eyes and found myself in an empty room. There was nothing there. Nothing on the floor where I had heard someone screaming and their body being carved. The money on the dresser, but it didn't matter. I didn't even grab it. I fled out of the house like a beaten dog. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I sought out some answers to the house I'd been visiting. The town captain believed my story that I was sent by a wealthy family to find out if the house was for sale and check if there were any history behind it. Years ago, a wealthy man once lived there. He was quiet and kept to himself, seemed to cause no harm to anyone. Every once in a while, he took in a call girl to keep him company for the night, but many men did the same. Not much to be suspicious about. Until the neighbors smelt something foul coming from his house. They found him in his room with a headless body of a girl on the floor. Who knows how long he had been there with the body, maybe days. He was standing still, like an upright coffin, and in his outstretched hands was the girl's head. He wouldn't put it down, just held it out, so steady and still, his expression dead. They shot him right there. The captain opened a drawer and drew out a file. This is the photo of the girl they believed was killed. She was an orphan, only 16. Probably did what she did for money. The other girls who worked with her said that she had been with the man 2 other times. It was on the 3rd night when he killed her. Here, take it. She was the same girl from my dream. But what chilled me the most was the sweater that she wore in the photos, white and soft. The same one I had found at the secondhand store with a note in the pocket. I thanked the captain, barely able to let out the words. When I returned to my shanty later that day, I discovered that the white sweater had disappeared from my closet, and so did the note. When I asked my roommates if they had seen or taken it, all I got was the answer no. I gave up working as a call girl and found a job as a caretaker for an elderly couple. Although the work was slow and hard, I persisted and saved up enough money to start college. Sometimes I passed the thrift store where I found the white sweater with the cursed note. I remember the 3 nights I had spent with the dark presence and how insane I had been, returning even after so much fear. For money. For curiosity. That's what a call girl's life did to you. You became jaded to the dangers you repeatedly put yourself into. Sleeping with strangers, potential murders, returning for money and the thrill of it. I tried to stuff my memories into the dark cracks of my mind. Forget it. But still, I wondered. What if I had opened my eyes? A few years later, I came upon an article in the news. A small one amongst a few other murders. They always wrote these stories in such detail, and my blood curdled. The body of a call girl had been found, her head severed. The girl's eyes were wide open.